And welcome to Hidden History Stories from the Secret City. I'm Keith McDaniel, along with my co host, Ray Smith. Good morning, Ray.
Good morning, Keith. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good.
Uh,
Um, we've got a special guest with us today. So, Ray, why don't you introduce him?
yeah, Tim Koeth has been here before. He came and helped us to learn about the German uranium cubes, but he's also has a very interesting story to tell us about how he came to be where he is, at University of Maryland, and has a reactor up there. But he's going to tell us some other interesting things about him. We just didn't have time to do that when the other program. It was so important to focus on those uranium cubes, and I appreciate Tim for doing that. But Keith, we'll just let him start and let's learn a little more about Tim Koeth.
Sounds good.
All right, Tim, take it away.
Yeah, good morning, guys. Thank you so much for having me back again. Uh, this is the sort of autobiography of Tim Koeth. I've never actually done something like this before, and as I was putting it together, I just had this overwhelming sense of being truly blessed, of having an incredible life. It's not often one has boyhood dreams that one after another just have come true, and things that I could not have anticipated. So I prepared a PowerPoint presentation, which I think captures a lot of this. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. And then I'll go into presentation mode.
All right.
So one of the aspects of my life that benefited this PowerPoint show is that I'm an amateur photographer, and most of the photos you see here I've taken, with the exception of a few. And I also like to take photos, so I've been unwittingly documenting my life to make to prepare us for this. So it's my portrait staring into the pool of our University of Maryland nuclear reactor while it's on, in that unmistakable Cherenkov blue glow. Yeah. And I call this reflecting on my life so far. So I really struggled with how to describe this, how to describe my life. Do I do it by time or topic? And I came up with this idea to create an inverse Gantt chart. And I realize now I just spelled Gantt incorrectly, but you get the idea. So normally when you set forth a program or project of some sort, you want to be sure you're on time and under budget. And my life has been over time and over budget in almost everything. And so I've done this inverse Gantt chart, starting in by topic. So science, I was born in 1975, and this is where the timeline begins. And I've always been very scientifically interested and minded. And at first, I didn't think I was a normal person until I actually got to college and I met other people. But I proudly say that I was interested in science from day one. I was interested in electricity specifically even before day one, and my mother tells stories about how her and my father were adding on while she was pregnant with me, adding on to the house, and she did all the wiring. And every time she would get near running a piece of Romex cable, I'd start twitching in her belly, and she thought I was being excited, and she suspected I'd turn out to be an electrician. So that was her prediction. So she's not wrong. One of my professors explained that every little child goes through phases. There's the outer space phase. So I had my outer space phase for a few years, which then led into a chemistry phase, which was for a few years, and then nuclear stuff. And we'll see that I sort of got stuck in the nuclear phase, and here I am today. And I didn't want to say nuclear engineering, and I didn't want to say nuclear physics and radiation detection, because it's all encompassing there. So that's why it's nuclear stuff. At the age of 16, I wanted to join our local volunteer fire company. So I was a firefighter for about 6 years, and that was very important to me. They gave me a sense of what it meant to contribute to the community, but it also brought about a sense of emergency response and being prepared for fires and incidents, which we'll see led into some of my professional activities. And I remember I was told once that the biggest thing about a fire department is the training that you go through. And I learned that the disaster that you plan for is never the disaster that you have. However, it's the thought process that develops the ability to think quickly in a tense situation. Then I went to college at Rutgers University and earned a bachelor's degree in physics, and I graduated in 1997. I went to work for Fermilab as an engineering physicist for about 1 year, and that was a very important experience for me. I returned back to Rutgers to work as a staff engineering physicist on developing detectors, and that was a great experience too. I did that for about 3.5 years. I got to go to Fermilab frequently. I got to go to CERN. In fact, it was during that time I was on a beam test at CERN by myself during the September 11th attacks, and that was that entire week that I was there was really forged in my mind. And it was the use of ham radio, and you'll see that that's been an important part of my life too, that I was able to communicate back home to my family. My father is a ham radio operator, and many of my wife is also. So that was a very interesting time, very stressful time. In particular, for that trip, I flew out of Newark Airport, and I looked out. I had a window seat, and I looked out and I saw the Twin Towers there as we headed out for that night flight. The evening sun was setting and reflecting off of the Twin Towers. And when we came back, we took a northerly approach into Newark Airport. And again, I had a window seat. And then all I saw was a smoldering pile. So that was a very unique time. During that time, I got the drive. I had this reinvigorated drive to go back to graduate school. So I did. I enrolled. My boss, who was in charge of the detector project, became the chair of my PhD thesis and committee at Rutgers, and he allowed me to participate in what was called the Joint PhD Accelerator Program at Fermilab. So while my degree is it has come from Rutgers, I actually spent most of my research time at Fermilab with another advisor, so the actual advisor of my PhD thesis, and her name is Helen Edwards. We'll meet her in a bit. After graduating in 2009, I went to University of Maryland, and I have stayed there ever since. I have been in many roles, and we'll get through those. The first was working on the University of Maryland electron ring, or UMER. And the reason why I went to the University of Maryland was because it was one of the few PhD granting universities in the United States in the field of accelerator physics, science, and technology. And I knew that I wanted to pursue that and have graduate students, etc. Okay, take a step back here. Now, that's sort of my professional development, but there are aspects of my life that are equally as influential, educational, and just important in my life. And amateur radio, or ham radio, is one of those. I earned my amateur radio license in 1989 of my father. The license came in the mail of January of 1990, and that's been a major part of my education ever since. We'll see that I built a cyclotron. And as a child, I learned about what cyclotrons were, and I saw a beautiful photo of the Argon 60-inch cyclotron unleashing its beam into the air. Then in college, I learned how, quote unquote, simple the cyclotron was. And I said, I will build one of these. And I did. It was not simple. And that has been an ongoing life project, very, very dedicated to that. Back to Maryland, I the first week on campus as a freshly minted postdoc, I wanted to see that Cherenkov blue glow. I went over and took a photograph, and in that first week of being at Maryland, and one thing led to another, and I became the director of that reactor for 5.5 years. After that, I was able to hand the reins over to an incredibly talented person that I've known from Fermilab. I was able to move into a position of a professor and a performing independent research. And of course, the uranium cube story, we know already that was a parallel. The lines of hobby versus professional activity are very blurred. And then a more recent the honor of my life is to have become a board of trustees member for the National Museum of Nuclear Science and History in Albuquerque. And I had a very strong hobby interest in cryptography as a child. I think many children do, but even through college. And it was at the Enigma machine, and the whole Enigma story became declassified in 1984. And I was about 9 years old, and I went to the local library and I got books on ciphers and codes and the Enigma machine. And I pursued an Enigma machine through college, but they were always way too expensive, and they still are way too expensive. But I've been fortunate to be able to trade and contribute and be able to participate in that community and slowly building up a collection of cryptologic equipment. So I then said, well, why list all of these items here? It's because they influence one naturally follows from the other. So obviously science fed the outer space and electricity interest, and then chemistry, of course. And that chemistry led to wanting to learn about the effects of radiation. I was handed Richard Rhodes' Making the Atomic Bomb book, and that was really my eye-opening experience. And I said, this is it. The nuclear stuff got me interested in, brought me to college. I got a degree in physics. That was the natural path to study. That brought me to Fermilab after graduation. And then that experience led me both to graduate school and the detectors, as well as the cyclotron. I applied for this joint PhD accelerator program at Fermilab, and I sat down with the administrator of the program at the time, and I brought my transcripts and all the normal stuff. But then I brought a couple newspaper articles that had been written about my cyclotron. And the director of the program leaned back in his chair, and he read one of the short articles, and he said, how much of this did you actually build? And I said, all of it. And he raised his eyebrows and goes, okay, I do not see why you will not be admitted to this program. So my hobby cyclotron landed me into a very prestigious PhD program, which I'm really thankful for. Grad school then, of course, led to going to UMD, and then the University of Maryland Electron Ring. In all of this aggregate experience, including the fire department, led to having the right credentials and the right interest to become the director of the reactor. And it turned out I was the only person at the University of Maryland at the time that had all the right boxes checked off to become the director of the nuclear reactor. So it's not like the competition was stiff, but I was extremely delighted about that. That led into the position that I have now, as I'm an assistant professor. I have PhD students. We'll meet some of them. And I have several large research programs. There are a couple red letter dates, which I mark as these miraculous events. As a teenager at 13 years old, I had a Geiger counter, and I accidentally discovered an abandoned radium source, a medical device, which was extremely radioactive, dangerously radioactive. And it was called a nasopharyngeal applicator. There is a dummy version of it in Oak Ridge right now in Paul Frame's collection. It was a medical device used for treating the nasal cavity of patients, including Frank Zappa, the music artist. And it was sort of a quackery device, but this thing had 100 millicuries of radium, or a tenth of a gram of radium. So on contact, the radiation dose was 50 R per hour. So I found this thing and I brought it home, and one thing led to another.
Where did you find it? How did you come upon it?
It was in my former grade school. I was in 8th grade at this point, and then I went back to my former school where an aunt was teaching, and there was a construction site out back. And I drove, my mother drove me over there. She wanted to see my aunt, and I took my Geiger counter and headed out towards the back where there's this excavation going on for a new building. And I didn't make it out the building before my Geiger counter started responding wildly. And I circled around and found that it was emanating, whatever this source of radiation was emanating from a little closet off the abandoned science lab. Went back, found the science teacher. He opened it up. We went, the radiation dose was so high in that little closet, that the meter was pegged on the highest scale. So we had to bring item by item out of that room until we figured out what it was. And it was this little rod, like handle on one end and a cap on the other. And it was called the nasopharyngeal applicator. I took the thing home and made some other measurements. That's only when I found out how dangerous it was. And showed my father. He made some calls, and in the next 24 hours, there was about 8 government people at my parents' house. They isolated the source. They transferred it. I had a makeshift shielding box that kept it safe. It was actually a 30-gallon drum lined with concrete with a 4-inch piece of PVC pipe going down the center. It still had a fairly high gamma field around it, but it was no longer a threat to health at that point. And they transferred it, and it all went very smoothly. And at the end, there was a report called the Piscataway Radium Incident. And it said, with the exception of taking the source home, the young man displayed a high level of knowledge in this field. But I love it, with the exception of taking the source home.
Yeah, I agree.
But that actually worked out well, because it went to a private residence. The state of New Jersey opened up an emergency fund to pay for the disposal. Had it been left at the school, this private school would have had to fork over about $200,000 in 1989, which would have crippled the school. So that was also a bit of a miracle. Another really important confidence boosting experience in my life was the night that I got the first beam out of my cyclotron that I've been working on since 1995. This was September of 1999 when the first beam occurred. And it was during Hurricane Floyd. The lights were flickering in the lab on and off. And I'm like, I spent 5 years building this thing. Today was the day. And sure enough, I got a little green spot on a screen inside the vacuum chamber, and it worked. And I plotted the current as a function of the magnetic field, and it was unequivocal evidence that the cyclotron worked. And that told me that I could really build sophisticated things. And I was still in college at the time. I'm sorry, no, I had graduated, but I was at Rutgers at this time. Yeah. Then, of course, was the gift of a second uranium cube to me. The first one is cool, but when the second one came to me, I'm like, okay. And this was the gift of Mary Dorman, who August of, I believe it was 2012, handed this to me. And we had a little conversation in the parking lot, and she said, happy birthday. And that's what just finally pushed me over the edge to dive into the uranium cube story and get to the bottom of it. Then, of course, the day I got the keys to the nuclear reactor, that very much like that satisfied 10-year-old Tim's dream. And it was truly the best job I think I'll ever have. But it was also simultaneously the worst job I ever had to have, because of the pressures and the responsibilities that came with it. It was an extremely stressful time. And I'm very proud of the work that we did. I transformed the facility from, it needed to be updated, and it is now a world-class research facility. And another red letter date was the day I no longer was the reactor director, relinquishing that burden and responsibility. There are 29 research and test reactors in the United States. So I had one of 29 of those titles in the United States. And you are, in many ways, a lot of people said that, oh, wow, you should be proud that you own a nuclear reactor. And I said, it's the other way around. The nuclear reactor owns you. My phone was on my pillow all night long, every night, ready to take phone calls for alarms or whatever. We had major inspections, and we did a good job. We never had a violation. The NRC verbally told us that we have a very nice facility. So I'm very proud of the work that we've done. I got to the point where it was time to hand the reins over, and handed it over to Amber Johnson, and we'll see a photo of her in a bit. And she has taken it to the next level. She's really expanded the research and educational opportunities there. And if anybody finds themselves in the Washington, D.C. area and wants to see a nuclear reactor, reach out to me or Amber, and we can arrange a tour. It's Ray, you've seen it. You've been on top looking into the reactor.
You gave me an excellent tour, and I really did appreciate it.
And then the final unbelievable miracle is the ability to become appointed a professor at the University of Maryland. And I have I'm just thriving, satisfying all of my curiosities into science and really being able to lead people and have a wonderful time. And the best part, somebody asked me, what's the best part of the University of Maryland? And without hesitation, I said, the people. Everywhere from the administration through to the students, in every direction you look, the administration, the staff, they're fantastic. We really have this team that tries to get stuff done, and we do. There's bureaucracy, of course, but everybody works to overcome that. Okay, so I think that's the Tim timeline. Sorry if I went on too long about that, but
that's good.
I saw no other way to describe all of that. So here's some evidence that I was a scientific youth. I never understood and still don't really understand how football and baseball play. And when somebody said, well, I won't embarrass myself any further, but just needless to say, I don't have a drop of sports gene in me, but I get 2 scoops of scientific curiosity.
I understand.
So I was very interested in electricity. My father's truck here, I'm holding a harness out of a washing machine that we had to repair for my mother, and I was delighted with that. I had a small chemistry lab in my father's basement. It's the center top photo. The photo on the right is from roughly 1987, 88, when Pons and Fleischmann announced that they had discovered cold fusion. I remember that day very clearly. We went to a diner, and there's one of those newspaper box stands right outside the diner. I asked my father if we could for a quarter, and we got the paper. And I didn't even order my breakfast until I read that whole article through. And in the next 6 months or so, I would accumulate all of the parts necessary from surplus stores to create the cold fusion cell that you see at the bottom. And I tried it, and of course, it did not work. I didn't have, so that is real platinum. I saved up all my allowance, and I did buy platinum from Sergeant Wells. So I built that platinum cage in there, and it's tellurium as the center conductor, because you could try different things like palladium and tellurium. I didn't have heavy water though; that was unobtainable. So I used seawater because there's still plenty heavy water in seawater, and that just bubbled over and made a mess.
Tim, I have a question for you, Tim.
Sure.
What did your dad do for a living? I may have missed that if you told me, but
I didn't. My father was a diesel mechanic. He really truly is a polymath. He never went to college. He was one of the smartest people I've ever met. He loved reading science fiction. He had a photographic memory. He could remember him reading a Mad Max book. It was probably like in 3rd grade or 4th grade, and I pulled it out of his hands and I said, okay, what's the second sentence on the 32nd page of it? And he just recited it to me. I'm like, how is that possible? He became the foreman of the heavy equipment fleet at Crisdell Paving Company in New Jersey. So if you ever drive through the New Jersey Turnpike or land on a runway at Newark Airport, or pretty much be on any road in New Jersey, my father managed the equipment fleet for 35 years or so for that company, all the pavers, rollers, and he would get phone calls in the middle of the night too. So he would always say, go to college so you don't have to turn the wrench like your father, and or answer calls in the middle of the night. And so you can sit in a nice cold air conditioned office. My life never turned out to that way. I still turn the wrench. I answer phone calls in the middle of the night, but it's a nuclear reactor instead of a paver. Sure. The photo on the left, I really was enamored with space for a few years, and I just dived into that. And I love that photo that my mother took, even though she was nonplussed. If you look real carefully, that is what I did to 2 of her salad bowls that I took downstairs to my dad's wood shop and drilled holes in.
Right.
And the parabolic antenna on the top pointing to the right was the scoop off of her soup ladle.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Oh man.
don't have any children myself, and I think I'm very glad. I was very proud of this creation, and I think there must have been really mixed emotions behind my mother, like, what did you do? But they were they were besides themselves hysterical. All right. Then at age 13, I was handed my first Geiger counter, and I went everywhere with it. This is the picture on the left is a beach off of Staten Island visiting another aunt, and it was only a few weeks later that I used that same Geiger counter, because this was about January. You could see how warm unbundled there. And then in February of 1989, it was either 89 or 88. I have to do the math. Probably 89, that I found that radium source. And the after the so the response from the authorities, they had white vans blocking off the street. There's caution tape at either end of our block. Our neighbors couldn't get into their homes. They really went overboard on the response, and this made a splash. The police were notified. Actually, my father notified the police, but they didn't believe him at first. And yeah, it was really funny. My father called the police and said, "Hey, my son brought home this radioactive thing," and the dispatcher says, "Oh, this is an issue for the fire department. Hang up and call the fire department, the non-emergency number." So he does. He calls. It's a small town. It's the same dispatcher. She answers the phone. "Sir, if you don't stop calling us, we're going to have to send the police over." He goes, "That's what I'm asking for."
Send them over.
Send them over. So it turned out that it was the next day, which is a Friday morning, that a health physicist doing an inspection at St. Peter's Hospital came over and verified that the source was there. By Saturday evening or Sunday evening, this had made the local newspapers, Courier News, Star Ledger, etc., were alerted to this event, and my father and mother both said, "Let him in, interview him," and that was a great experience. So that's why this gets a red star too, because all of a sudden this nerdy kid got fame for doing science stuff, and that really gave me a lifelong confidence that I still ride on, and I want to share that with everybody. I mean, if you like something and you're unique and others make fun of you or I isolate you because they don't understand it, work hard at trying to explain that to them. Okay. So I was hooked. This is where I got stuck. Radiation stuck with me. Science fair projects were radiation based. The picture that you'd see on the right was truly a mock-up scene in my grandfather's overgrown garden of a source recovery. There is actually nothing radioactive there. We were just practicing. About 15 or 16, I would pull my friends into this who were so kind to to go along with it. At 16 years old, Ray, I don't know. Do you recognize the scene all the way on the left-hand side?
Oh, yes, I see that.
So for my 16th birthday, I asked my aunt and uncle, who lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, to take me to Oak Ridge. I wanted to see Oak Ridge. This is the height of the first Persian Gulf War, so security measures were high. I was not allowed to bring in a camera, but they let me bring in my Geiger counter and let me go to the X10 reactor face, etc. And I remember they had the security manual that was about 8 inches thick, and they opened it up and they were like, "Personal survey meter. There is no precedence for personal survey meters." So like, okay, bring it in.
How about that? That's neat. If it
No,
ain't in the book, it don't exist.
yeah, now if there is a clause, it's probably the Tim Koeth clause about personal safety.
Tim Koeth.
And then I also on my 16th birthday, I signed up at the volunteer fire company as a junior firefighter. And at this point, I also with the help of my father, put up a nice 50-foot tower in the backyard. It's in the bottom of it's the roof of my parents' house, and we put up a nice antenna, which just allowed me to communicate all over the world via ham radio. So there's a lot of overlap in all of this. You know that there's emergency response, and ham radio goes into emergency communications for emergency response. And then what is the emergency? It could be the threat of a nuclear event, be it a weapon or a reactor accident or an abandoned source. So there's a lot of overlap in all of these, and I really enjoyed the experience gained from all of that, which, by the way, really fed into my ability to become the reactor director. So you weren't allowed to go into a burning structure until you were 18 years old. So we responded to an amazing gas fire explosion that turned into a fully engulfed structure. And that's me holding a hose here. And at some point, the chief needed somebody to go in and put water on two antique vehicles that were in the garage full of gasoline. So I, at the age of, I won't actually say the age, but you can read between the lines of that I got to go into a burning structure and suppress fire spread. And that was an exhilarating moment. And I had no clue that the press had shown up for this and to snap this photo. So it was the Arbor Fire Department, AFD. You can see the back of my turnout coat. So that was a great experience too. And I really never get to tell anybody about this. And it was a fun time.
Good.
Then the cyclotron. I mentioned that I had seen a picture of a cyclotron from Argonne National Lab in my childhood. I was somewhere in high school, and I said, that's neat. And then when I got into college, the fall semester of 1995, learned about the principles of how a cyclotron operates. And it uses a magnetic field and alternating electric fields to accelerate a particle to very high energies without using an actual high voltage applied. Oak Ridge has had several, such as the Oak Ridge isochronous cyclotron, and I've seen that. It's now in storage at the Smithsonian here in DC. So just for fun, my friend Stuart, sitting at the right here, and myself here on the left by it, we built this machine from the ground up. The frame, for instance, the frame for the table were rusty long lengths of 4-inch iron channel that was tossed into a dumpster. So we pulled them out, heaved them out of the dumpster, and brought them over to our shop. We sandblasted them, cleaned them up, cut them. We bought a welder, we did the welding, and every little nut and bolt on this we prepared. The magnet frame, I got very lucky. I visited the Argonne 60-inch cyclotron while I was doing the engineering physics work in 1998 at Fermilab. Argonne was about a 40-minute drive away from Fermilab. So I called up and met with the Al Youngs at that time. So this is the accelerator that I saw as a kid. So I'm going to that lab and I'm getting to see it. And I was actually quite disappointed when I got there. The lights were burnt out. We had used flashlights. It was not being used. And it was a mess. Just experimental debris for 40 years piled up in there. And I was sad that this machine that I saw a pristine photo of from 1950 was now dilapidated. And but nevertheless, we crawled all over underneath it. And he said, "Why are you interested in this? It's a strange request." And I brought the book along. I showed him. He goes, "Oh yeah, I was there that day that we did this. We bypassed all the interlocks and we opened the door and we even put a 2x4 inside the beam, leaving the machine into the air. So this seems producing gobs of radiation in there." And so he was still alive. And he said that when he put the 2x4 in the exposed beam, it sounded like bacon sizzling. It was the power being delivered to the 2x4 from that just energy in the beam was wonderful. So they had that was like on day one. As they built up the facility, they needed to transport that beam to different experimental rooms. And the way they did it was with a switching magnet. And the switching magnet just happened to have a circular set of pull tips, 12 inches in diameter. And it was a little baby cyclotron shaped magnet in the shadow of this huge cyclotron. I said, "So what's going to happen with all of this stuff in here?" He goes, "Well, in about 6 months, they're going to come in, bring bandsaws and cut everything up." And they did. I said, "What's going to happen to that magnet? Can I have it?" And he looks at me and he raises his eyebrows. He said, if you can move it, you can have it. when I had built, so I never wanted to rest. I didn't sleep for about a week. I got everything prepared. I flew home to New Jersey, prepared a bunch of stuff, flew back, rented a 24-foot dockite truck, and we got that magnet. And so the coils on it were bad, so I had to get new coils. But the iron is that magnet. So this little magnet that you see in the picture on both of these photos sat in the shadow of a big cyclotron magnet for about 60 years, and then it itself evolved into becoming its own cyclotron magnet. As a result, we learned so much. Stuart and I learned so much that I convinced the faculty at Rutgers University that we should move this into the senior physics lab, or the modern physics lab, where I was able to then teach students. Here's my first set of undergraduate students that I taught with the cyclotron, Liam and Carolyn, and I've been teaching ever since. We've in a meaningful way influenced about 100 undergraduate students now, and about a dozen of those students have gone into the world of accelerator science and technology because of this project. It's of a field that they didn't even know. I've been able to meet a lot of people that have become my mentors. So the big picture on the right, obviously me standing in the center. To my left is Timothy Antea. He's a cyclotron expert, and he visited, and he's been a supporter and champion and a teacher of mine. And then to my right is Timothy Ponter. He was an undergraduate student, just floundering in his interest. And then his last semester, he got hooked on the cyclotron. Now he works for a company called IBA, and he's going around the United States installing proton radiotherapy facility cyclotrons. So he's dedicated his life to the healing arts using cyclotrons. So I find it curious that they're all named Tim, but it just shows that this is a family of, I call it the guild of cyclotron builders, because there really is no book, even though I'm working on a book. So there's no book yet that conveys this information. It just goes from generation to generation to generation. And then this connection with Timothy Antea worked out well, because he hired us through his company called Ionetics for a small team of my closest friends and family to form a company called Cyclotronics. And we built a guts for a cyclotron that Timothy Antea is making for a medical isotope generation. So this was the prototype. It worked, and there have been subsequent versions of this machine. So we only built the insert. So Cyclotronics came into existence and left after that. In 2016, I was able to move the cyclotron to the University of Maryland, where we taught, instead of 2 or 3 students at a time, now we're teaching about 16 students at a time in what's called a capstone design class. So the students, these undergraduate, senior electrical engineering, physics, and material science and engineering students would work together in smaller groups to build something, to try something new or design something. And that was going very well until the pandemic hit. We tried doing this remotely once over Zoom, but it's such a hands-on class that it worked, but I classify it a disaster nonetheless. So we didn't do that any longer via remotely. But I took the time to create the script for a set of videos. And this is the first instance here. We'll click on this and see if this comes up. Are you able to see the cyclotron?
Yes, we got it.
Great. So I would encourage any of your viewers to go check this out. All you have to do is Google cyclotrons ! And my last name, Koeth, Koeth. And right now we have 9 episodes. And make sure you have a bag of popcorn ready to go if you're going to binge watch them all end to end, because it is about 3 hours. It's 2 hours and 59 minutes and 30 seconds or so of everything you wanted to know about a cyclotron in the subsystems. I made it, I've been criticized that it's just way too long, but I'm okay with that, because the person that wants to build a cyclotron or learn how to build a cyclotron, all the information that they'll need is in here. And it really captures all of the curriculum content of the class that we teach. There's the introduction, which is more about, so you can step into this not knowing what a cyclotron is, and then come out the back end of this series knowing how to build a cyclotron. Okay. There's one more that we're making, episode number 10, and that's all about neutrons, using the cyclotron. So instead of the machine, is now using the machine to do the nuclear physics experiments that you want it for. There are little Easter eggs and fun stuff buried in there, so I would encourage everybody to watch them all the way through. We don't take it too seriously. All right, I said the cyclotron and all those experiences led me to graduate school, and I was very fortunate to be brought into the Fermilab Joint PhD Accelerator Physics program, and I was able to select the advisor, and decision was easy. I selected this woman here, who's standing to my right. Her name is Helen Edwards. I met her when I was in 1998, when I was at Fermilab as an engineering physicist. I worked in her group, and I was just scientifically bewitched by her. An amazing human being, and we could spend an hour talking about her. So everybody warned me. Everybody said, you're going to work for Helen Edwards? She's pretty tough. I'm like, okay. And then when I went out to meet her and her husband, and even her husband pulled me aside. He goes, do you know what you're getting yourself into? I'm getting a little nervous. And she did not disappoint. She was an extremely fierce, driven person. And I have seen her rightfully go nonlinear on people that deserved it, and I very proudly say she never ever once yelled at me. And I was just on the same page as her. She had a hard time articulating why you should do something, and anybody that would challenge her would receive that. But she was always right. She had this pure intuitive ability to lead huge projects. She was at Cornell. She worked with Bob Wilson at Cornell. She was a graduate student of Boyce McDaniel and Bob Wilson at Cornell. And then Bob Wilson hired her as a postdoc, and then ultimately to be in charge of the Fermilab booster construction. She built that. She became the head of Fermilab's accelerator division. Then she became the technical lead of and chief architect of the Tevatron, which is the largest accelerator in the United States. She won the Scientific Medal of Honor from George Bush, who awarded it to her, along with 3 of her colleagues for that. She then went on to become the first technical director of the superconducting supercollider, the SSC, in Waxahachie, Texas. I'm sure you've heard of that. And that suffered a fate of being closed in 1993, and she went back to Fermilab. An unbelievable human being. So she put me in charge of a project the day I showed up, and it was called Capture Cavity 2. It was supposed to be my PhD project. It was the project to make the first high gradient superconducting RF cavity at Fermilab come alive with a minimum of 30 megavolts per meter. In July of 2006, we achieved 33 megavolts per meter, and I had accomplished this. And the idea was to pair it up to an existing accelerator that would enhance that energy to 45 MeV. However, Fermilab was trying to get involved into International Linear Collider, and the upper administration, all the way up to the director of Fermilab, wanted to take this achievement and put it into a different facility. I'm not showing you the machine. It's actually in the concrete bunker behind this group of people. And unfortunately, the lab had different plans. So it was literally scooped from my possession. So that ended my first PhD project after being there for 2 years. And of course, I was a little sour about it. Helen gave me 0 time to lick my wounds and instantly gave me another project. I show this picture because Helen put me in charge of this project, and the roughly 40 people or so I was the lead of. So here's a PhD student commanding this team of diverse vacuum technicians and cryogenic engineers and RF engineers, and I was the technical lead for that. This should have gotten a star because it showed me how to operate a big program, but more importantly, it showed me what a talented team of cooperative people can do. There is no stopping a team that has diverse talent and perspective and has a common goal. I consider everybody in this photograph a friend, and we had a good time. Everybody's trying to put a smile on their face, but we were usually in tears laughing all the time. So PhD project number 2, and despite being a photographer, I did not take many photos of it. It was to build a beamline and build a whole new cavity. So the photograph on the top left inset there is what we call a deflecting mode cavity. It was what I had initially started designing for that group back in 1998 before I left to go back to Rutgers. So now we're at the summer of 2006, started from scratch. I designed this. I worked with the fabricators. I worked with Rutgers University Machine Shop, and we built this thing, as well as assembled all of everything you see in this 3D model. We also built piece by piece by piece in under 2 years. So that was an incredible program too. And again, I called Fermilab the land of plenty because I had I didn't have an unlimited budget, but I was never ever told, no, you can't get that. So my PhD project, I spent several $1,000,000 on that I never saw. Helen just had a signatory authority. So that was an incredible experience too. Being at a national lab with all the in-house capability to build stuff. The cavity was brazed in the technical division. These magnets that you see, like the yellow, canary yellow magnets, they were all built at Fermilab. These guys are built at Fermilab. The beam pipes and some of these things were bought commercially, and they're expensive. And there was incredible technical staff there that supported me. I put this picture in. This is part of that beam line. If you can see this sort of green magnet here, that's the same green magnet there. So we're looking at that portion of the beam line. We're missing everything else, and just a little corner of one of these blue magnets. But the important thing to communicate here is Amber Johnson, who's in that photograph. She and I work together. She's another extremely talented person. Her and her husband are at Fermilab. Her husband is getting a PhD in high particle physics, and Amber worked at the A0 facility. And I said, if I ever own a company, I want you to work for me. And that came true. When I was the director of the reactor, I was able to hire Amber, and she really, and that's why she's the director today. Okay.
Oh, that's good.
And it really goes to emphasize, it's not the project, it's not the institution, it's the people that you work with that make progress happen.
Yeah.
So I graduated with my PhD in 2009, and that's why I give this a star, because that I finally did it. Standing in this photo, sort of a bittersweet photo. It was the day that the Tevatron was shut down. It was the longest running the highest energy particle accelerator in the world for 27 years. Most accelerators have a lifetime of about 12 years. Helen was in it, it employed 5,000 people. It was the centerpiece of Fermilab since 1986. It pioneered superconducting magnets, which are used in the medical field today. So if anybody goes for an MRI, it is because of the magnets that were developed by the program that this woman led. So I highly recommend learning about her more. And this is her husband, Don Edwards. He is also an important mentor to me. So this photo was taken on the day that the Tevatron shut down, and Helen had the honor, or the sad honor, of actually pressing the off button for the last beam on that day. And then we had a bit of a celebration. The photo injector, which is the machine that I did my PhD work on, that we're standing in front, it's behind us here. relied on the surplus liquid helium that you'd get from the Tevatron. And because the Tevatron was shutting down, there's no longer a supply of liquid helium, and therefore the A0, which was totally isolated, also had to shut down. So this was, and this was a machine that she built from scratch also. This is her project in her retirement. So it was sad that she had to see two of her major systems of her life shut down at the same day. So you can see the sort of the strain in her face. On the left-hand side is a photo of my graduation day, and my father snapped this photo. It's the only photo we have, so I'm sorry it wasn't more flattering. But this is back at Rutgers in May of 2009.
All right.
Then I moved to Maryland, and there was a lot that happened in between, and a lot of excitement. But that was the day that I became the director on the photo on the left. And it was more than just the reactor. It's the radiation facilities and all the facilities. The 250 kilowatt reactor. Again, if anybody wants to visit this, we can arrange. It's quite easy. We also had a very large cobalt 60 panoramic irradiator. It's the picture on the top right. It's a cobalt 60 source for doing gamma ray irradiation. On the bottom left, which is a tool that I use now as a researcher. Most of the time, I'm about the only person that uses the LINAC, is an electron linear accelerator. And I all these photos I've taken, including the one of the electron beam going through the air, and I sacrificed my camera to this because that is the harshest radiation environment that we can produce. The camera was in a lead box with 4-inch thick walls, with exception of a hole for the lens, and it was pointed away, and we're looking at that beam through a mirror back at that, and it's still, the radiation in that room is so hard, it killed the camera in about 8 seconds.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't mean to do that.
I was going to say that wasn't intentional, but it can happen.
It can happen. And the nice thing about the linear accelerator is when you turn it off, it's completely benign, completely safe. It's only when it's on, and the walls are very, very thick concrete. It's like a bank vault, so the radiation does not come out. And then the bottom right picture is my cyclotron again. We moved it to Maryland in 2006, and to support it, we house it in a lab that's part of the radiation facilities. It can produce radiation. We've done radiation damage studies with it for people. So it's primarily a teaching tool, but it's also a research tool. So here is something that started in my parents' basement that is now a tool in radiation facilities at the University of Maryland.
Wow.
So it's again taught many students about accelerators.
Yeah.
I have graduated 4 PhD students so far. I'm very proud of them. There's Will, who is now at Lawrence Livermore National Lab. Amy, who's at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, an inspector there and trainer. Slavita, who is at Fermilab. She went back to where I came from. And Kirsten, Ray, I think you met Kirsten when I visited Oak Ridge in 2019.
I think so.
Her and her husband, both. Her husband was my postdoc, and Kirsten, I'm extremely proud of her. She was the first Schul fellow to get the Schul Fellowship for accelerators. Generally, it's neutron science. So she's at Oak Ridge as a Clifford Schul fellow, and Kirsten and George met when they took my undergraduate cyclotron class. So my cyclotron has produced
them together, yeah.
Produced more than neutrons. And they actually just they themselves have a little baby.
Good.
And so today, if you ask me what my primary research is, I have 3 major research programs, but I'll just mention one of them because it's the coolest looking one. I have support from University of Maryland. I have a contract with Los Alamos. I've had support from Lockheed Martin, and currently I'm under a grant with DARPA, what's called the Young Faculty Award. It's a very prestigious award, and I'm so honored to have it bestowed upon me. And it supports me and my team. This is almost all of my team. There's about 4 more people missing. Currently, I have 8 PhD students, 6 of which are photoed here, along with a couple staff members and a postdoc. So you might recognize Mimi here, and a recent faculty hire, Carolyn Chun, here. So she's a professor. There's me. And then Noah's a graduate student. Bryson's a graduate student. Meryl's a graduate student. Kate's a graduate student. Claire's a graduate student. Emily's going to be a graduate student soon. And then Ariana back here, she's also a graduate student. So I have an impressive group of talent. All of these people are so smart. They're so bright. I don't deserve a single one of them. And we have a diverse set of backgrounds. Noah is extremely good in electromagnetics, and Meryl's very good in material science, for instance. And Carolyn's a mathematician. And I also forgot Holly. Holly is our lab and research manager. She brings incredible organization to our group. So we have a powerful team, and we can get a lot of stuff done. Our program manager from Lockheed Martin stopped and said, we are the most productive group that he's ever met. So I'm very proud of this team. And what we're doing is understanding charge getting embedded into plastics. And this is a problem for satellites. Satellites wind up in the path of a geoelectromagnetic storm, for instance, and they'll charge up. They'll retain that charge. And if enough charge builds up, the charge will arc over internally and create these discharge patterns, but deliver that charge to sensitive electronic devices and burn them out. So since we're a material science department, we're trying to understand how to mitigate this, how to bleed off the charge, but still maintain the insulating properties, the dielectric properties, and mechanical properties of these materials. So that is our mission, is to make materials for highly charged environments. All right.
And I'm glad to say that I have about 3 pieces that you gave to me when I was up there. And they're something that I enjoy showing people. I can't tell them a whole lot about it, but they're really delighted when they see it.
It's the only form of artwork that requires a particle accelerator to make.
Yeah, that's right. That's for sure.
All right. So that's where I'm going to end here on my professional activities. If we still have a little bit of time, I want to show some of my hobby activities, and I'll try to fly through them.
Okay, if you can. We're doing fine, but oh my goodness, look at that.
Yeah. So I have a collection. I like to collect things, nuclear things. So this is my Geiger counter and radiation detector collection. And
the hundreds.
But yeah, it's over 150, and these tell the story from the Manhattan Project. A couple of these instruments on the top shelf actually have Y12 or K25 stickers on it from the gaseous diffusion. So these span from the Manhattan Project through the Cold War, through the civil defense regime, to the prospecting boom of the 50s, to military instruments, and they really have a story of their own. And we know about the uranium cube. I am on the board of the National Museum of Nuclear Science and History in Albuquerque. In addition to loaning them my uranium cube, I've given them some other artifacts. Here I'm holding a spark gap that was invented during World War II. The secret patent was assigned to Dr. Hornig. It's a triggered spark gap. The X unit for the Trinity test, as well as for the Nagasaki bomb, had 4 of these. And this is what gave the high rise time and the low jitter in order to set off all the detonators simultaneously.
Excellent.
So that'll be on display at the museum also. And this is a bit of a miracle too. I was given a set of spare safing and arming plugs that were flown on the Enola Gay to Hiroshima and back. So this is the Enola Gay returning. Photo is taken by Ed Ryan, this is the gentleman on the right. He was a technician on Tinian Island who was in charge of building these and testing these. If you look at the little boy bomb here, it's in the bay, about to be loaded onto Enola Gay. You'll see 3 green handled plugs. Those are the safety plugs. So when they're plugged in with the green ones, it safes the weapon. When Morris Jepson, the Enola Gay was about an hour out from Hiroshima, Morris Jepson climbed into the bomb bay, had a pocket full of red handled ones, the arming plugs, and pulled out the green ones, put the red ones in, and now the weapon was armed. And I wound up as a gift from a phenomenal collector who had these from the Ryan's children, gave them to me. I have loaned them to the National Museum of Nuclear Science and History. And here is an actual L11 casing And here's the case with the safing and arming plugs on display there. So,
Very good.
but my activities in the nuclear realm extend to an amateur level. We built something called a fuser, and I wanted to bring. I won't spend too much time on this because there's a couple other things that really are unique. A lot of it's the ability to perform nuclear fusion with deuterium in your own basement. This link brought us to my website that put together with a couple of my close friends that we work together, and it's the nuclearphysicslab.com. Can't believe we got that URL, but nuclearphysicslab.com, and this really captures a lot of our non-professional activities that had no other outlet. So we built this machine. It came from a industrial surplus auction, the chamber. We cleaned it up. We just put a lot of sweat equity into it and had a lot of surplus equipment. And we built a machine that's sitting about 3 feet from me right now that can produce nuclear fusion and get neutrons from it. And this is an activate metals and at a very low level, but it definitely works. Here's the signature of indium being activated. And this is on our website. We put it there for anybody that wants to learn about it. There's a lot of students. I'm not the only one, and we're not the only ones that have done this. There's probably about 50 of these amateur fusers out there. This is something that is unique. I wanted to do this since I was a child. I was able to perform a plasma pinch. And I'm very interested in all things nuclear, including fusion. I'm co-PI on a large DOE ARPA-E project at Maryland. I don't have time to talk about it. But this I built as an extracurricular activity. And I think the best thing to do is just go, it's also on the nuclearphysicslab.com website under plasma to pinch machines and toroidal pinch, and it brings you to this. It explains it that we use the donut of plasma is very conductive and use a transformer action to pump a lot of current through the plasma in itself, and the induced magnetic field causes the plasma to pinch down on itself. So here's the chamber. The primary windings are these four copper single turn windings that go around that come out braided into pigtails, and we use xenon or krypton and produces this pinch. But what is really special is that I was able to borrow a high-speed camera, and let's see if this plays, and capture the dynamics of it. This all occurs in about 30 nanoseconds.
Wow.
And I'm sure at a national lab somewhere this has been filmed, but I've not seen anything publicly released about that. So all right, so that's the plasma pinch experiment. And that came as a result of me wanting to build what was called the plasma betatron. And it's also documented on our website. I was, my interest in accelerators. So I was trying to make a very high current electron accelerator. And the idea would be, instead of having an electron gun in there, you just use the thin string of plasma loaded with electrons as the source of electrons and try to accelerate them. But as any good plasma experiment has, there's a lot of instabilities, and here is a high-speed image of that attempt to run. So instead of forming a very nice thin beam, it makes this very evil-looking set of dragon tails, and it did not work. And this is a curiosity. We've not been able to figure out why in this configuration we can't get that nice thin line. So there's real science going on in this. Okay. I'll skip over this, but I've measured the lifetime of a muon in my basement. I was given a large set of scintillating paddles that were being thrown out from a set of portal monitors. And so I scavenged the detectors out of it, and it is able to capture a muon. So this oscilloscope trace on the top right shows the muon entering the system, it getting lodged in there. So the fact that both of these have a simultaneous blip on it, and then some number of microseconds later, there's the second blip, and that is the decay of the muon. The muon gets captured in the block of plastic itself. The muon comes from the upper atmosphere from high energy interactions, barrels down through the atmosphere. In this particular case, gets lodged in the detector, the ones with the ones with the blue tape on it. And when it decays, we see the second flash of energy as it converts into an electron. And I let this run for months. It's in the basement like a fine wine, aging. I collected enough data and was able to collect sufficient statistics to correctly measure the lifetime of a muon.
Oh, wow. How about that? All
So,
right.
and I've been saving the best for the last here.
Okay.
The picture on the left here is Ernest Lawrence, played by Josh Hartnett in the Oppenheimer movie. I'm sure you've seen it.
Yes, I.
Maybe a couple times.
Uh-huh.
And I want to point out that Ernest Lawrence, the inventor of the cyclotron, who's fairly well portrayed in this movie, historically accurate, is my academic great-grandfather. So Ernest Lawrence brought on Robert Rathbun Wilson, as a PhD student at the Rad Lab at Berkeley. Robert Wilson then went on to Cornell, which is where he met Helen and Don. And then we all know that Robert Wilson was appointed the founding director of Fermilab. He is quoted as saying, when Senator Pastori said, "Why should I give you this $250 million for this accelerator lab? What does it have to do with the defense of this country?" And Bob Wilson said, "Nothing." Pastori came back and said, "It has nothing to do with the defense of our country." And he said, "No, I'm sorry." And he goes, Pistorius said, "Don't be sorry, but he's sure there's no military application." And Bob Wilson finally responded, said, "It has nothing to do with the defense of our country other than making our country worth defending." And I thought that was absolutely beautiful because it was a unique facility. So then I became a Helen Edwards graduate student. And on the day of her death, I got to see her a day before she passed away. And on the morning that she passed away, Don called me. And we talked a little bit, and he said the relationship that you two had was very special, and I agreed with him. And I said, how have you notified any of Helen's other PhD students? And he said there were no others. He said, "You're the only one." And so what a life honor to have been her only PhD student.
Yeah.
So I say all that to connect the dots here. I was Ernest Lawrence's academic great-grandson, and it's interesting that I should be so enthralled with cyclotrons myself. The cyclotron shown here, of course, is mine. It's set up to make neutrons, and I'm holding a fission chamber. So just the week before Oppenheimer came out, I was sharing with one of my PhD students, Ariana, how what fission looks like. So you have the cyclotron with a little chamber of uranium in it, and it goes through amplifiers, and then finally you hook it up to an oscilloscope, and this is an old oscilloscope, to demonstrate that. And here I have a movie, and I hope it conveys through Zoom good enough. What we're looking at is you see all the little pulses like the grass on the bottom. Those are alpha particles from the uranium. Every now and then, or a bunch of, you see these really tall spikes. Is that coming through?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes.
Those are fission events. That's demonstrating the relative energy released in a fission event versus a 5 MeV alpha particle. So, and it's not even it's a nonlinear scale. So there's about 200 million electron volts released in every one of those pulses in fission. So neutrons are being produced by the cyclotron. They're going through the white block, slowing down. They're entering into that chamber, inducing a fission in the uranium-235 there. And that uranium-235 is then splitting apart violently at the nuclear level, and it ionizes the gas that's in that tube, which is argon, and it produces an incredible electric current. And you just every now and then you see one that's 2/3 or halfway up the screen compared to all the little blips on the bottom.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you could see them.
So this was exactly the same way that Fermi and Dunning demonstrated fission for the first time in January 25th, 1939 at Columbia University. And there was a Life article about that, even though this turned into the world, highly top secret program, that this still photograph of the same oscilloscope trace was published. So we recreated that demonstration exactly, and so we actually were so enamored by it, we got quiet, and then we had the lights off in the lab to be able to see the oscilloscope screen. And then about a minute into it, Ariana said, "It's like sitting around the nuclear campfire watching the embers." And we had,
yeah.
and we, for the opening night of Oppenheimer, that Friday night, a large group of us went. There was 20 some of us, and Ariana just happened to be sitting next immediately to my left. And when the scene came up in Oppenheimer, that it was exactly this. They tried to portray this, and they showed some oscilloscopes. We both started like bouncing in our seats. We've done this for real. We've done this for real.
Oh, that's neat.
That was really great.
My goodness.
Unrelated, I've just had the time and resources to start entering into the world of antique cryptologic machines, and I've already entered a contest which I won to be able to. There's a Wired article from just the last month, August 27th, about it, about that, and these machines are neat. None of them ever work when they come to me. I take my time to restore them, and I learn something new to learn about. Every year at my home, we host something called High Voltage Weekend, and it's this year we had a record-breaking 51 participants. Everybody's encouraged to bring some kind of scientific demonstration. The more high voltagey, more energetic, the better. And this is just a small sampling of all the demonstrations that people brought, and we have good food and good times, and it's a 48-hour event. And here we develop new demonstrations that we'll bring back to the classroom. It's a gathering. It's by invitation only, and everybody here is a professional and extremely safe. So we know that everything will be fine. We even have a little kids demo in the back room, a little Van de Graaff generator, and vinegar and baking soda. So that was fun.
Yeah,
and
very good.
One, I believe this is the last one here. This is after it gets dark. Our friend Jay fires up his Tesla coil.
Oh my. Oh.
And of course, everybody stands back at a safe distance or is in the quote unquote cage of death, but non-death. And that is my final slide, and this is my thank you slide, Ray. I suspect you remember this.
I do remember it.
You're a highlight of my life.
Yeah, you're right there in the Calutrons in Beta 3 at Y12. Absolutely. Well, Tim, it's amazing. You've had an amazing life, and I'm so glad that you took the time to pull all that together. I'm afraid that if it hadn't been for me asking you to do this, you might never have pulled that together.
Yeah, and that is a very serious thank you. In fact, as I was putting this together over the past week, and I'm like, what do I have to talk about? And then I realized, wow, I can't talk about it all. And there are so many other things that I've done that I just never even not had a chance. But
I appreciate that, and for our viewers that have stayed with us, I know this is a longer session than we normally have, but there was so much of such interest that we wanted to be sure and give Tim the time to do it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here, Tim.
All right. Very good. Thank
you. Keith, if I could remind you, we're going to have Danny Thomas on next. He writes some books about the Elza Gate area, and he'll be talking about that. And for our viewers, we're going to be delayed for about an extra week. I have the opportunity to go to Iceland, and I just could not turn that down. Tim, I'm going to take some wonderful pictures of the Northern Lights if they'll just be out when I'm there.
I'm looking forward to that. That's on my bucket list of photos to take.
Yeah, being a photographer myself, it's on the high part of my bucket list too. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Right. Now, also for our viewers, you got something special coming up this week, don't you? Alan's coming in.
Alan Carr, the historian from Los Alamos National Laboratory, will be in Oak Ridge all this coming week. and he is scheduled to speak at the Oak Ridge History Museum at 7 o'clock on Tuesday night. I know this is a unusual time. They normally have their public meetings on Thursdays, but he's only here. He'll be leaving on Thursday. So we had worked it into his schedule to let him talk on the Tuesday evening at the Midtown Community Center, the Oak Ridge History Museum at 102 Robertsville Road. Encourage people to come. Not only will he be there, but Bryce Steves will be there too. She is the one that has produced the documentary on Oppenheimer, the one that's produced by the Los Alamos National Laboratory, and it's out available on YouTube now. And then again, in addition to that, Dick Groves is going to be here next week. He is the grandson of General Leslie Groves. That, by the way, I just learned last week in a webinar that I was participating in that Groves did not like to be called, didn't like his name Leslie as well as he did Richard, but he wanted to be called Dick. Now his grandson is Dick Groves, and he's a fine person. He's also producing a documentary on General Groves. So we've got some really exciting times coming next week. We're going to also do a panel out at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory where we will be discussing the Oppenheimer movie, but we'll also be focusing on what has happened since then, especially at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And as Tim, you and Keith both know, some of the most amazing things happening in the world today are happening at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, as well as at the University of Maryland.
That's right.
All right. Well, very good. Well, thank you,
Thank
Tim and Ray and folks. Thanks for staying with us, and we'll be back in a few weeks with another Hidden History.
Yep.